Welcome to a quiet corner of the night, far away from noise, far away from the familiar rhythm of the world. You're here now with TellTronic, where stories breathe slowly and shadows move at their own pace. Tonight, you're not being warned. You're not being chased. You're simply being invited to drift into a darkness that doesn't bite but lingers. A darkness that hums gently beneath your thoughts. Soft enough to lull you to sleep, yet deep enough to make the edges of your dreams curl with something unsettling. If you enjoy these journeys into the quiet and the strange, don't forget to relax, settle in, and join us whenever the night feels a little too still. There's always room for one more at TellTronic. Now, take a slow breath. Let your shoulders fall. Let the rest of the world slip away, because the night is long. And the story waiting for you has been whispering for a very, very long time. Miles Hendrickson had never liked driving at night, but he found himself doing it more and more these days. He wasn't afraid of the dark, and he wasn't superstitious. He simply preferred the comfort of daylight, its honesty, its clarity. But tonight, the night had claimed him. Miles drove alone along a narrow mountain road that cut through a forest dense enough to swallow the moonlight. The pines leaned inward over the asphalt like old, crooked guardians. His headlights sliced through the darkness in a thin, trembling beam. He was exhausted. A long week at work, longer nights trying to sleep, and dreams that never seemed to leave him rested. His thoughts drifted in and out, as if pulled by gentle tides. His radio crackled faintly, but no stations came through. It was just static. Soft, whispering static. Miles turned it off. For a moment, he considered stopping to rest. But he told himself that if he just kept driving, he'd reach the small mountain motel he'd booked online. A place with a quaint name. Something like the Whispering Pines Inn. He didn't remember exactly. He yawned, rubbing his eyes. And then, something appeared in the road. He hit the brakes so hard that the tires screamed. The car slid to a stop, the smell of burning rubber rising like smoke. His heart hammered. A figure stood in the middle of the road. Or, Miles thought someone stood there. But as he blinked, the figure faded into the dark, like a shadow melting into deeper shadow. He exhaled shakily. Just tired, he muttered to himself. Just tired. He put the car in drive and continued. But for the rest of that stretch of road, he felt watched. Not by something approaching, but by something that had never left. A few miles later, Miles saw a dim glow through the trees. At first, he thought it was the motel. But as he drew closer, he realized the building was far too large. A massive weathered house sat at the end of a gravel pull-off, its windows dark, its roof sagging slightly with age. A porch wrapped around its front, cluttered with rocking chairs that didn't look like they'd been used in years. A sign dangled from a rusted metal bracket, swinging in the breeze. The Valmont House Est, 1874. The name meant nothing to him. He pulled over just to rest his eyes for a moment. He didn't plan to stay long. Just enough to recenter himself before continuing toward the motel. But when he stepped out of the car, he saw something he couldn't ignore. One window on the second floor glowed faintly. Warm yellow light, soft and inviting. Miles stared at it. Then he checked the time. His phone had no signal, but its clock worked. It was later than he'd expected. Midnight, and he felt too tired to continue safely. Maybe the place still hosted travelers. Homes like this sometimes did. Old-fashioned boarding houses, run by families who passed them down through generations. He stepped toward the house. The gravel crunched under his feet, slow, uneven steps, sounding louder than they should have in the windless night. He paused at the porch steps. The rocking chairs creaked softly, but there was no wind. His breath fogged out in front of him. It hadn't been that cold a moment ago. Just ask if they've got a room, he murmured. Worst they can say is no. He knocked on the front door. The sound echoed through the house hollow, distant. After a moment, the door creaked open entirely on its own. The house was silent. Inside waited darkness, thick and unmoving. But the warm light from upstairs flickered gently, like an invitation. Miles stepped inside. The door swung closed behind him with a soft thud. He told himself the house was old. That's all. Old houses did things. But old houses didn't usually feel like they were holding their breath. The foyer was enormous. A grand staircase spiraled upward, lit only by the faint glow from the second floor. Dust hung in the air, swirling lazily around Miles as he stepped forward. He called out, "Hello? I'm looking for a place to stay for the night." No answer. He waited. Silence. Just as he turned to leave, a voice drifted down from the top of the stairs. "You're welcome to stay, if you don't mind the company." Miles jerked his head upward. A man stood there. Tall, thin, dressed in an old-fashioned suit that seemed preserved from another century. His hair was gray, swept neatly to the side. His expression was unreadable polite but distant. "I didn't mean to intrude," Miles said quickly. "I was looking for a motel." "No motels this far up," the man replied. "Not anymore," Miles frowned. "But I booked one." The man's eyes flickered with something recognition, maybe. "There hasn't been a working motel in these mountains for years," he said calmly. "If you like, you may rest here. The Valmont House has always sheltered travelers." Something about the way he said always unsettled Miles. Still, he needed rest. And he was too tired to argue. The man descended the stairs with smooth, almost gliding steps. "I am Mr. Corbin," he said. "The keeper of this estate?" "Miles," he replied. "Miles Hendrickson." Mr. Corbin nodded politely. "Come, I'll show you to your room." He led Miles up the stairs. That warm glow Miles had seen from outside was coming from a single candle on a small table in the hallway. No electricity, no lamps, no modern comforts. But the candlelight felt safe. Mr. Corbin opened the door. Inside was a simple guest room with a bed, a chair, a dresser, and a window overlooking the dark forest. "You may rest here," Mr. Corbin said. "Breakfast will be ready at dawn." Miles hesitated. Do you get many travelers?" Mr. Corbin looked him directly in the eyes. "Not anymore," and he closed the door. Miles listened to the man's footsteps fade down the hallway. Then he heard the rocking chairs on the porch begin to creak again. Slow, steady, rhythmic, but still. No wind. Miles lay on the bed, fully dressed. The room felt cold despite the blankets. His breath puffed gently in the air. He closed his eyes for a moment, but then he heard it, a faint whisper. So soft he thought it was his imagination. Then again, a little clearer. "Don't stay." Miles sat up, heart pounding. "Hello?" he called softly. Silence. He pressed his ear to the wall. Nothing. He exhaled slowly, trying to calm himself. It had just been the old woods settling. He lay back down. Another whisper. "He isn't what he seems." Miles shot upright again. This time, he stood from the bed and checked the hallway. It was empty, still, quiet. He returned to the bed and forced himself to lie down. Then the whisper came one more time, soft, urgent. "Leave while you can." Miles squeezed his eyes shut. His exhaustion swallowed him whole. And despite the whispers, despite the cold, despite the eerie quiet, he drifted into sleep. Miles slept lightly that night, if he slept at all. His dreams were pale fragments. The creak of doors, a girl's silhouette, a cold hand resting near his ankle, but never touching. When morning finally broke, it slipped through the curtains in thin gray lines, barely illuminating the room. He rose slowly, as though the air itself had weight. Valmont House was quiet. Too quiet. Old houses often groaned or sighed, wood expanding and settling as temperatures changed. But Valmont House did none of that. The silence felt almost proud, as if the place were holding its breath, listening. Miles dressed and made his way downstairs. He expected to find Mr. Corbin at the kitchen table, humming, polishing his glasses, doing something to break the monotony. But the room was empty. A teapot rested on the stove, cold to the touch. The chair Corbin always used sat tucked neatly beneath the table. Miles waited a moment, listening for footsteps or the rustle of newspapers. Nothing. He opened the back door. The thin morning fog clung to the ground, and the garden, overgrown and twisted, was still. "Corbin?" Miles called. His voice seemed too loud for the morning. No answer. He stepped back inside. Something subtle had shifted in the house overnight. It wasn't temperature, or scent, or light. It was placement. A framed painting near the stairs hung slightly crooked, just a few degrees, but Miles distinctly remembered straightening it last night. A single book lay open on the hallway floor, though he hadn't touched it. He bent to pick it up. A name written on the inside cover gave him pause. Alara. The same name Mr. Corbin had spoken so casually, so rehearsed. Miles ran his thumb across the letters and frowned. He didn't know why, but the name felt heavy, like it had been waiting. As he set the book aside, his peripheral vision caught something new. A hallway. A hallway he was certain had not been there yesterday. It stretched beyond the staircase narrow, shadowed, its old wallpaper peeling in long curls. At the far end hung a single lantern that flickered despite the still air. Miles exhaled, steadying himself. He knew this house shifted. He knew it revealed things in its own time. But this felt deliberate. He stepped into the hall. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the lantern died. Dark. Silent. Waiting. Miles stood perfectly still. The dark around him didn't feel natural. It wrapped too closely, too warmly, as though it recognized him. He reached into his pocket for his phone. It flickered to life, but the screen dimmed instantly, dropping to a faint glow. Enough to see outlines. Enough to keep moving. He stepped deeper into the hallway, passing old portraits cloaked in dust. Each face seemed blurred, not by age, but by intention, whoever the subjects were. The house didn't want them recognized. Halfway down, Miles stopped. A door stood slightly ajar to his right, and in the crack of shadow, a girl's eyes stared out at him, wide, still, unblinking. Miles froze. His breath slipped from him all at once. The girl did not move. She simply watched. Her eyes so pale it was almost colorless reflected the faint glow of his phone. A faint shape behind her suggested long hair, and the outline of a white nightgown from another era entirely. Miles swallowed. "Are you—" His voice cracked. He tried again. "Are you Alara?" The girl blinked once. Slowly, the door creaked open an inch wider. Her face emerged, soft, young. Not frightening, just impossibly solemn. As though life had left her, but something else remained to take its place. She stepped forward, bare feet silent on the floor. Miles resisted the urge to step back. The girl lifted one hand and pointed farther down the hallway. Not urgently, not warningly, just instructing. "Do you want me to go there?" Miles whispered. Her head tilted slightly, as if listening to something he could not hear. And then she vanished. Not violently. Not with a scream or a flash. She simply faded, like a reflection in water when the surface is disturbed. Miles remained alone, and the corridor ahead seemed to darken in response. He exhaled slowly. "All right," he murmured into the quiet. "I'm going." The further Miles walked, the more the hall seemed to stretch, elongating subtly with each step. The air grew colder, too thin and brittle, as though it had been undisturbed for decades. Finally, he reached the end. A door waited there, massive, blackened by time, reinforced with iron brackets. Unlike the others in the house, this one bore a heavy lock. Rusted, ancient, fused into place. Above it, etched deep into the wood, was a symbol, a circle intersected by 3 lines. A crude drawing of an eye. Miles touched the surface gently. Cold shot through his fingers, like touching ice. He jerked back. The symbol began to seep, darkening, as though ink were bleeding from inside the wood. No, not ink. Shadow. It writhed for a moment, then retreated back into the carving. Miles stepped away, heart pounding. Another symbol below it caught his attention, nearly invisible under the grime and age. Evie Alara Valmont. The girl, the one who had just led him here. Miles ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "What did they lock you behind, Alara?" he whispered. The house answered with a long, low groan, as though shifting its weight, as though waking. Miles turned sharply. The hall behind him was now completely dark. There was no going back. He faced the sealed door once more, and for the first time since entering Valmont House, he felt something whisper, not around him, but inside him. A suggestion, a nudge. "Open it." Miles closed his eyes. "No," he said aloud, firmly. "Not yet." The whisper receded, displeased. He turned away from the door, forcing himself to walk back through the dark, even though something behind it watched him leave. Something patient, something aware. When Miles returned to the main hall, morning light now shone brighter through the windows, too bright considering how long he'd been gone. Hours should have passed, but his phone insisted it had only been 18 minutes. He steadied himself. Valmont House was toying with him. When he entered the kitchen, Mr. Corbin was suddenly there, standing perfectly still, facing the wall as though listening closely to it. Miles halted. "Corbin?" The old man turned slowly, a warm smile on his face. "Ah, morning, lad. Have you eaten?" It was too normal, too casual. Miles swallowed. "Where were you earlier?" "I couldn't find you." "Oh, I've been right here," Corbin said pleasantly. "Been here all morning." Miles's stomach tightened. The stove was cold, the teapot untouched. "Are you sure?" He pressed gently. Corbin chuckled, waving a hand. "You've only just woken, Miles. The mind plays tricks in old houses, dreams linger. Best to shake them off with tea." He turned toward the kettle, humming, but Miles couldn't look away. Corbin's shadow on the wall didn't match him. It was slightly taller, slightly thinner, and its head tilted in a direction Corbin's did not. Miles blinked, and it snapped back to normal. Corbin poured tea as though nothing had happened. "Long day ahead," he said mildly. "The house likes to introduce itself slowly." Miles's hands trembled. Introduce itself, not reveal, not explore. Introduce, as though it had a personality, a will, a need. "Corbin," Miles said softly. "Who is Alara?" The humming stopped. Corbin's back stiffened, only for a second. Then he resumed. "Alara," he murmured. "A lovely name. But many lovely names have been whispered through these halls, lad." Miles's jaw tightened. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't answering. Corbin turned, smiling warmly. "If the house showed you something today, that means it trusts you already," he said. "Be grateful. Many who come here never see a thing." Miles felt a chill. "Should I trust it back?" Corbin's expression softened, then dimmed. "No," he said gently. "Not yet." The rest of the day moved strangely too slow, almost stretched, as if the house wanted Miles to feel each moment drag across his skin. Corbin busied himself with chores, tending to corners of the house Miles didn't know existed, humming old melodies that flickered between familiar and foreign. Miles drifted to the study. It was one of the only rooms he felt halfway safe in shelves of books. The faint smell of leather and dust, an armchair faded by time. But today, the room felt different. Something waited on the desk. A ledger, thick, worn, bound in cracked brown leather. Miles didn't remember seeing it there before. He opened it carefully. The first page contained a single list of names. Valmont House. Residents and guests recorded by H. Corbin. Miles leaned closer. The dates were wrong. Very wrong. Names appeared under years, spanning more than a century: 1892, 1911, 1954, 1978. Yet all written in the same hand. Corbin's hand. Unmistakable. Miles's pulse quickened. Corbin couldn't be that old. He flipped further. Some pages contained notes beside names. Stayed one night. Left before dawn. Heard her singing. Returned upstairs. Locked in. Refused the invitation. The house remembers. Taken by the hall. Miles swallowed. Taken by the hall. At the very bottom of the most recent page, his own name. Miles Henley. Arrived 3 nights. The house is considering him. His breath caught. Considering me? A soft whisper brushed his ear. He snapped around. No one stood behind him. But the whisper returned closer this time, as though murmured from the spine of the ledger itself. Read further. Miles hesitated, then obeyed. The next section was different. The ink darker. The handwriting sharper. A heading stretched across the page. The Lost Wing. His chest tightened. That was the hallway from this morning. He read, "The Lost Wing reveals itself only to those the house has chosen to test. Within it lies the sealed door. Behind that door, she waits." The ink quivered slightly on the page. No breeze, yet the letters trembled. Miles forced himself to continue reading. Alara Valmont was the last heir. The house adored her, claimed her. The door was sealed, not to keep something in, but to keep the rest of us out. Miles's hand shook. He whispered the girl's name. Alara. At the far corner of the study, the air grew cold. Something moved behind him. He closed the ledger slowly, turned and saw her, standing in the doorway, silent, still. Her pale eyes glowed faintly, just enough to outline her shape in the dim room. Not threatening, not reaching toward him, just watching. Miles tried to speak, but his voice failed him. The girl lifted her hand and pointed again, just as she had earlier, but this time not toward the hall. Toward the window, toward the afternoon light, toward the world outside. Miles's breath steadied. "You're not trapped," he whispered to her. "You want to leave." Her lips parted. Not in a smile, not in fear, in longing. Then she vanished. The ledger slammed shut on the desk. Miles flinched. And behind him, the door to the study began to close slowly, quietly, as if guided by invisible hands. Miles left the study with the ledger's words echoing in his head. The house adored her. The house claimed her. He walked back into the main hall, needing air, needing space. But the moment he stepped inside, he felt it. The house was awake. Floorboards inhaled beneath his feet. Curtains shifted without a breeze. The chandelier above him swayed slowly, as though rocked by something unseen. Miles. He spun around. Corbin stood near the bottom of the staircase, hands folded calmly behind his back. "You've been reading things you weren't meant to," Corbin said softly. Miles stiffened. "Is that why she appeared?" he asked. "Alara?" Corbin's eyes flickered. "She appears when she chooses. Not for my sake, not for yours. For hers." Miles stepped forward. "Corbin, what really happened to her?" The old man's expression changed just slightly. A subtle sadness, a heavy weight. "She grew up in this house," Corbin murmured. "Every hall knows her footsteps. Every wall remembers her voice. She was cherished. By you?" "No," Corbin said quietly. "By the house." Miles's skin chilled. "And the sealed door?" Corbin exhaled, his shoulders drooping. "Some rooms should never have been built," he whispered. "Some grief should never have been locked away." Miles felt a slow dread rising. "You're avoiding the truth." Corbin followed Miles's gaze to the upper floor. "It's not truth you're seeking," he said. It's permission. Permission for what? To open the door. Miles's chest tightened. He hadn't told Corbin he found it. He hadn't described the hall. He hadn't said anything. Corbin stepped closer, whispering, "If the house wants you there, it means you remind her of someone." A cold ripple slid down Miles's spine. "Who?" Corbin's voice deepened. "Alara." That night, sleep refused to come. The house didn't settle, didn't sigh, didn't quiet. It watched. Miles lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, hearing faint sounds drifting from the wall's whispers. Footsteps, soft, humming. Near midnight, something tapped at his door. Not a knock. A tap. Light, rhythmic. He rose cautiously and opened it. No one there. Just the hallway. And a small envelope on the floor. He picked it up. His name was written on it in careful cursive. Ink faded, old. Miles opened it and pulled out a photograph. A girl, Alara, standing by the garden archway. Her white dress rippling slightly. Her hands clasped. Behind her stood someone else. A man. His face blurred by motion or time. But his posture, his height, his shape, Miles's heart stopped. It looked like him. No, not similar. Identical. He dropped into the wooden chair beside his bed. What does this mean? Down the hall, that same tapping sound began again. Slow, steady, coming closer. He clutched the photograph, breath tight in his chest. The tapping stopped right outside his room. And then a whisper, "Come." Miles closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the corridor was pitch black, except for a faint glow at the far end. The lost wing. The house had opened it again. And this time, it wasn't waiting. It was calling. Miles stepped into the hallway, photograph in hand, pulse pounding through his fingertips. The whisper returned soft, coaxing, echoing from somewhere deep within the lost wing. "Come back." His feet moved almost on instinct. Not pulled, not forced, but guided. The house wasn't pushing him. It was welcoming him. The narrow corridor stretched forward again, lanterns flickering weakly. Miles walked slowly, deliberately, listening to every distant creak. Halfway down, he saw her again. Alara. This time, she wasn't hiding behind a door. She stood in the open, facing him fully for the first time. Tall for her age, long dark hair, bare feet, the same nightgown, her expression unreadable. Miles's voice trembled. "Alara, why me?" She blinked once, gaze lowering to the photograph in his hand. Her lips parted. And in a voice like brittle leaves dragging across stone, she whispered, "You came back, before." Miles's chest tightened sharply. He shook his head. "No, this is my first time here." But she interrupted. Her voice grew clearer. "Not for you, for him." She pointed to the blurred figure in the photograph. The man who looked exactly like Miles. His pulse hammered in his ears. "Who was he?" Miles whispered. Alara stepped backward slowly, drifting toward the end of the corridor, toward the sealed door. Not walking, gliding, her eyes never leaving his. Miles followed, not because he trusted her, but because he needed answers. As he approached the door, it pulsed. Yes, pulsed like a living thing feeling his presence. Alara stopped before it. Her expression changed. Fear. A quiet, trembling fear. Miles stared. "What's behind this door?" Alara raised a shaking hand and reached toward his cheek, not touching, but hovering, just near his skin. A gesture of sorrow, of warning. Her voice trembled, barely audible. "Not what, who?" Miles swallowed hard. "Then who is behind this door?" Alara's eyes glistened. She whispered only one word. "You." And the sealed door unlatched. A low, ancient click. The breath of a century exhaled. The corridor lights died, and everything went still. The metal lock released with a soft, trembling groan like bones shifting after a long sleep. Miles stepped back involuntarily, heart pounding as ancient hinges creaked. The sealed door didn't swing open fully. It opened just a sliver. Just enough to breathe. Just enough to invite. A cold draft slipped through the crack, brushing Miles's skin thin, searching, tasting. Alara backed away, eyes wide with terror. The first clear emotion he had seen on her. Miles. Her whisper quivered, evaporating into the dark. Don't. The crack in the door widened a bit more. A faint, rhythmic sound drifted out. Not whispering. Not breathing. A heartbeat. Slow. Deep. Familiar. Miles's chest tightened. He knew that rhythm. It was his own. He took a step forward. Alara shook her head violently. It's not ready. Miles froze. What isn't? But the girl was fading again, like mist thinning in sunlight. Her final whisper lingered. You came here twice, but you only remember once. Then she was gone. The heartbeat behind the door faltered. Silence settled. Cold. Dense. Watching. Miles backed away slowly, never turning his back to the crack, until the hallway shifted abruptly around him. Lights flickered on. The corridor lengthened. The atmosphere warmed. The door sealed itself shut with a slam that echoed through every room of Valmont House. Miles stumbled back into the main hall, breath ragged. Mr. Corbin stood at the top of the staircase, looking down with an unreadable expression. You shouldn't have gone there, Corbin said quietly. Miles clutched the photograph. Why did she say someone who looked like me was here before? Corbin descended the stairs slowly, deliberately. Because he was. Miles inhaled sharply. Corbin continued. Your great-uncle Theodore. You resemble him almost exactly. Enough that even the house noticed. Miles stared in disbelief. My mother never told me about a Theodore. She wouldn't, Corbin murmured. Some branches of a family tree are pruned to protect what remains. Corbin reached the bottom step and met Miles's gaze. Theodore came here almost 40 years ago. He stayed exactly 3 nights. Miles's voice was a whisper. What happened to him? Corbin exhaled deeply, his breath trembling. The house kept him. Miles staggered back. Then why am I here? Corbin's expression softened with a painful blend of pity and fear. Because the house is deciding whether it wants to keep you. 2. Chapter 14. The story Corbin didn't want to tell Corbin led Miles into the sitting room, a dim, dusty space with a fireplace that hadn't been lit in years. He gestured for Miles to sit, then lowered himself into a creaking armchair. There are things you need to know, lad, Corbin said gently. And things I've avoided telling you because the house doesn't like its stories shared. Miles frowned. The house listens? Corbin's eyes flicked to the ceiling. It listens. It watches. It remembers. Miles gripped the photograph tighter. Tell me about Theodore. Corbin sighed, leaning back. Theodore Henley arrived just as you did, unexpectedly, quietly, drawn by something he never explained. He was fascinated with history, with old places, with the unusual. When he reached this house, it welcomed him. Miles swallowed. How? It showed him the lost wing, Corbin said. Miles felt his stomach drop. He met Alara too, didn't he? Corbin nodded. She adored him. He reminded her of someone she'd lost. And the house once it saw that began to take interest. Miles leaned forward. What do you mean by take interest? Corbin's eyes darkened. It began to make rooms appear for him, lead him places, whisper things only he could hear. Every night, he went deeper into the house's hidden holes. And every morning, he looked a little less like himself. Miles shivered. What happened after 3 nights? Corbin hesitated. On the 4th morning, he didn't come down for breakfast. Miles closed his eyes. And I went to search for him, Corbin whispered. I found the sealed door open. Just a crack. Miles's breath caught. Corbin's voice trembled. Theodore was standing inside, eyes closed, breathing slow, as if asleep. Miles leaned closer. But he wasn't asleep, was he? Corbin shook his head. No, he wasn't. Miles gripped the arm of his chair. Then what was he? Corbin's next words sliced through the silence. He was part of the house. A long moment passed. Miles whispered, "What does that mean?" Corbin looked up, eyes hollow. His body remained. His mind wasn't fully gone. Sometimes at night, I would hear him humming, or calling my name, or scratching at the walls. Miles felt cold crawl across his spine. And Alara? Corbin swallowed. Alara had already been taken by then. She was the house's first love, but not its last. Miles shuddered. Why didn't you leave? Corbin smiled sadly. I did, many times. But the house calls you back. His gaze drifted to the window, voice soft. You came here because you heard it too, didn't you? Miles didn't answer, because the truth was undeniable. He had felt drawn here, dreamed of this place before he ever saw it, seen hallways in his sleep long before he stepped into them. Corbin's voice lowered. Miles, the house remembers blood, and you are Theodore's kin. Miles's pulse quickened. You think the house wants me because of him? No, Corbin murmured. He looked directly at Miles. The house wants you because you are him. Chapter 15. The Unsettling Mirror. Miles sat frozen, staring at Corbin in disbelief. What do you mean I am him? That doesn't make sense. Corbin leaned forward, voice low and fragile. When a house as old and hungry as this one takes someone, it does not simply swallow them whole. It lives with them, in them, through them. Miles shook his head. No, that's impossible. Is it? Corbin whispered. Have you never felt déjà vu here? Never felt as though you were walking a path you'd already walked? Miles opened his mouth to protest, but the memory surged. That first night, when he walked upstairs, every turn felt familiar. The study felt like he'd sat there before. The sealed door. He knew the cold radiating from it before he even touched it. Corbin continued. The house takes pieces, memories, imprints, echoes. Sometimes when someone related to the taken returns, the echoes awaken. Miles's hands trembled. You're saying I'm possessed? He breathed. No, Corbin murmured. Not possessed. Reflected. Corbin pointed toward the hallway mirror across the room. Stand there. Miles hesitated. Corbin's eyes hardened. Go on. Miles stood. The mirror was tall, cracked at the edges, dusted with age. He expected to see himself tired, shaken, confused. He did, mostly. But something was off. His reflection was delayed by just a fraction of a second. When he lifted his left hand, the reflection's hand rose an instant too late. Miles blinked. No, that's just the lighting. Look closer, Corbin whispered. Miles leaned in. That was when he saw it. His eyes. In the reflection, they were slightly different, lighter, older, carrying a grief Miles had never felt. A whisper echoed behind him. Oh, Theo? Miles spun around. The room was empty, but the voice lingered, brushing the back of his neck. He turned back to the mirror. A chill ran through him. For a split second, just one flicker. The reflection wasn't him at all. It was another man. Same jawline, same hair, same build, but older, haunted, gaunt. Theodore. The mirror cracked straight down the middle. Miles stumbled back, heart racing. Corbin didn't move. He simply watched. That is why the house sees you, Corbin murmured. Because it remembers him through you. Miles clutched his head. No, I'm not him. I'm not. But another whisper cut through his panic. Soft, young, feminine. You're both. Alara stood in the doorway again. But this time, she wasn't looking at Miles. She was looking directly at the mirror. Her voice trembled. 2 lives. One shadow. Miles froze. "Alara," he whispered. "What's behind that door?" "Who am I to you?" Alara stepped closer. The air chilled around her. She lifted her hand and touched Miles's cheek. Cold. So cold his breath hitched. Her eyes softened. A tear slipped down her pale face. "You promised..." Miles swallowed. "What did I promise?" Another tear. Another whisper. "That you would come back for me?" Miles's knees weakened. His vision blurred. He whispered, "Alara." "I'm not Theodore." Her voice broke. "The house thinks otherwise." And as the last word left her trembling lips, every light in the house flickered. The walls groaned. The floorboards heaved. The house was waking again. Hungrier. Needier. Calling. Miles woke before dawn, though he didn't remember falling asleep. His eyelids were heavy, his pulse slow, as if the house had pulled him gently under and released him only when it chose to. The guest room was dim, lit by the faintest wash of blue-gray morning light. The air felt cold, not the ordinary chill of an old house, but a stillness that settled deep in his chest, like the quiet inside a cathedral after everyone has left. He sat up slowly. Something was different. The floorboards beneath his feet were colder than they should have been. He frowned, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. The house seemed heavier this morning, as though it had shifted during the night. Or grown. He dressed quickly and stepped into the hallway. Silence greeted him. Thick, motionless silence. Even the distant ticking of the grandfather clock had ceased. That alone unsettled him. Last night, the clock had been relentless, marking every second with a steady, hollow clack. Now, nothing. As if time itself had paused somewhere in the dark. Miles moved down the hallway, and he noticed it. A doorway that hadn't been there before. It stood between two guest rooms he had already explored. A narrow wooden door with an iron handle, utterly ordinary in appearance, and absolutely wrong. The paint around its edges looked fresh, the frame unweathered, but the walls on either side were coated in years of age. This door hadn't simply been closed before. It had not existed. Miles's breath slowed. The house had grown a new part of itself. He reached out a hesitant hand. The iron handle felt warm, startlingly warm. He opened the door. The hinges didn't creak. They didn't groan. They moved soundlessly, smoothly, like a door that had been tended to daily. As though something or someone used this room often. Miles stepped inside. At once, he realized what was wrong. There was no dust, not a trace. The room was immaculate, unnaturally clean compared to the rest of the house. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, illuminating a writing desk, a neatly made bed, a small oil lamp, and a wardrobe. Everything was arranged with meticulous care. He ran a finger across the desk surface, spotless. His chest tightened with unease. No dust in a house this old meant only one thing. Someone had been in here recently. He scanned the room again, more carefully now. A notebook sat on the desk, leather-bound with a ribbon marking a page halfway through. A quill lay beside it, its end stained faintly with dark ink. Miles approached it slowly, as though he were disturbing something sacred. He opened the notebook. The handwriting inside was elegant, looping sharp at the edges, unmistakably Mr. Corbin's. Miles began to read. The house has begun to remember him. Last night, it moved the East Hall by 3 paces. He does not notice yet. That is for the best. Miles's throat tightened. This was written recently. The ink still fresh enough that it gleamed when caught by the morning light. He turned the page. He will reach the threshold soon. The mirror has already recognized him. The house grows impatient. His stomach nodded. Recognized him? Impatient? His pulse climbed as he flipped to the next page, almost against his will. I fear only one thing. If he finds the portrait first, the choice will not be mine. Miles froze. A portrait. What portrait? What choice? He turned to the next page. but it was blank. The next one, too. The entire second half of the journal was empty, as though Corbin had stopped writing abruptly, or had not lived long enough to continue. Miles set the journal down carefully. When he straightened, he noticed something he hadn't before. Someone had carved 4 deep gouges into the wardrobe door. Not with a knife, not with a tool. The grooves were uneven, jagged, claw-like, as if something inside the wardrobe had tried to get out. Miles stepped back. A soft sound came from inside. Not movement, breathing. Slow, measured, and close. He didn't breathe, didn't move. The wardrobe rattled. Just once, small, barely there, but deliberate, like a warning knock. Miles backed out of the room slowly, eyes locked on the wardrobe. The air felt charged, humming with invisible tension. He stepped into the hallway. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the wardrobe inside slammed violently. The door behind him shut on its own. The sound reverberated through the hall. Miles stood perfectly still, every hair on his arms raised. The house was no longer shifting randomly. It was positioning him, guiding him, preparing him. And somewhere inside this sprawling, restless place, there was a portrait waiting for him. One that Mr. Corbin feared he would find. One the house wanted him to see. The corridor outside the dustless room felt different now. Heavier, as though the very air had thickened with awareness. Miles stood still for a long moment, letting the silence settle, listening for any hint of movement behind the closed door. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the house breathing around him. He exhaled slowly and began walking. Not toward the stairs. Not toward the safety of the occupied rooms, but deeper into the house. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but something in the journal entries, that line about the portrait, kept circling in his mind like a moth trapped against glass. Mr. Corbin feared Miles would find it, which meant the portrait was important. Dangerous, perhaps, or revealing. And if the house wanted him to see it, it would guide him. He moved past the East Hall, past the library with its always open door, past the narrow staircase that creaked even when untouched. The deeper he went, the colder the air became. The house around him felt older, too. The wallpaper more brittle, the floorboards more warped, as if he were walking backward through time with every step. Eventually, he reached an intersection of hallways. Left was familiar. Right was unwelcoming. Straight ahead was neither. The space felt suspended, as though the house itself withheld judgment. He chose straight. The hall grew darker and narrower until he felt the walls close in near his shoulders. He raised a hand to steady himself and brushed along the paneling, only to feel a small metal plaque beneath his fingers. He lifted his candle and read it. The portrait wing closed indefinitely by order of the Valmont Miles swallowed. Eleanor Valmont, the founder of the estate. The woman rumored, according to the fragments he had read in Mr. Corbin's scattered papers, to have a temperament too brittle for daylight. He pushed the plaque aside with his thumb and found a keyhole beneath it. But the door wasn't locked. The plaque had simply been hiding the seam. He pressed gently. The door swung open. The smell hit him first, a blend of old varnish, mildew, and something faintly sweet, like fruit left to rot in a sealed jar. His candlelight revealed a long gallery lined on both sides with portraits draped in heavy cloth. Miles stepped inside. The door closed quietly behind him. He didn't look back. The portraits stretched down the gallery like silent sentinels, each covered in velvet claws that rippled in the faint draft. His footsteps echoed across the marble tiles. The ceiling arched overhead, decorated with hand-painted constellations, though many had peeled away, leaving empty voids where stars should have been. He approached the first portrait on the left and touched the cloth. Cold. Far colder than the room. He pulled it back. The face staring back at him was of a young man. Handsome, confident, eyes sharp as cut glass. The nameplate beneath read, Jasper Valmont minus 1834 to 1859, remembered for his brightness. Miles studied the portrait. Jasper's eyes had a strange intensity, so vivid they almost seemed to follow him. The brushwork was exquisite, but the expression held something else entirely, not joy, not grief, but a hyper-awareness, as if the painter had captured him in mid-revelation. Miles swallowed and moved down the line, lifting cloth after cloth. Portrait after portrait revealed another member of the Valmont lineage. Women in elegant dresses, men in formal military coats, children posed beside mechanical toys or family pets. At first, the series felt predictable, an ancestral gallery like many old estates possessed. But the deeper Miles walked, the stranger the portraits became. The lighting changed subtly in each painting, growing darker, more nocturnal. The figures became more rigid, their eyes less human, their expressions tight with the strain of forced composure. Some were painted in harsh contrast, as if lit from below by unseen fire. Some had backgrounds that blurred into smears of shadow. Some had faces oddly elongated, stretched, or subtly distorted, but only just enough for the mind to question whether it was intentional. Miles stopped at one portrait that chilled him more than the rest. A woman in a high-collared dress, her auburn hair pinned neatly, her lips thin and pale. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, knuckles white from tension. But it was her eyes, hollow gray, glassy, almost reflective, that held him captive. The plaque read, Eleanor Valmont, 1820 to 1892, the architect of stillness. Stillness. He felt a shiver rise up his spine. He pulled the cloth back over the painting quickly. At the far end of the gallery, a soft glow flickered through a cracked doorframe. Miles approached cautiously. The light inside pulsed slightly, like a candle struggling against a draft. He pushed the door open inch by inch, letting the light spill out into the hallway. The room beyond was small, more a chamber than a proper room, and in the center of it stood an easel. A fresh easel, polished, well-maintained, not a speck of dust on it, as if someone had been using it recently. A cloth covered the painting resting on the easel. Miles froze. Every instinct told him this was the portrait, the one Corbin feared he would see, the one the house wanted him to find. The cloth hung loosely, edges trembling with a draft Miles couldn't feel. He stepped forward. The air tightened. The walls creaked softly. Even the flame of his candle bowed inward, as though being drawn toward the painting. He took hold of the cloth and pulled it away. The breath left his lungs. It was a portrait of him, Miles Arkin, painted in staggering detail. Every line of his face, every shadow beneath his eyes, the exact slope of his shoulders. But the version of him in the portrait looked older, tired, haunted, as if the house had taken something from him that he hadn't yet lost. Beneath the painting, a fresh nameplate gleamed. Miles Arkin? The house remembers its own. Miles staggered back, the room spinning, the candle trembling dangerously in his grip. The portrait did not stay still. His reflection, his painted self, blinked, slowly, deliberately. Then the painted mouth moved, not fully, just enough for the whisper to slip out. You've come home. The candle went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Darkness folded around Miles like a heavy curtain, shutting out the world inch by inch. The extinguished candle left behind a thin strand of smoke that curled up past his fingers, disappearing into the pitch. For a moment, he stood absolutely still, too stunned even to breathe. The portrait's whisper seemed to linger in the air, suspended like a thread between him and the canvas. You've come home. Home. He swallowed hard, his throat stretched tight. His pulse thudded in his ears, loud, uneven, almost painful. Slowly, he reached out across the darkness until his fingers brushed the cold wood of the easel. The painting was still there, silent now, unmoving. He listened. Nothing. No rustling. No shifting. No more whispers from the painted mouth. Just the hollow quiet of the portrait chamber. Miles forced himself to think. He needed light. He patted his pockets, searching for matches he knew he had brought. But his hands touched nothing. Empty. Did he drop them? Leave them elsewhere? Or did the house take them? His breath hitched. He took a careful step back, letting the darkness adjust around him. Slowly, gradually, the faintest remnants of light filtered in from the hallway, just enough to outline the doorframe. He moved toward it, hand out, guiding himself along the cold air until his fingertips skimmed the edge of the door. Then he froze. There was another sound now, very soft, very close. A gentle rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. He turned his head toward the easel. The tapping continued, slow, deliberate, exactly like fingernails tapping wood. Miles felt every muscle in his body tense, a slow wave of dread rising from deep within his chest. The painting was doing it. He didn't look, didn't dare. He stepped through the doorway, out of the small portrait chamber, and into the dim corridor beyond. He pulled the door shut behind him. The tapping stopped instantly. A silence returned that was too complete. The kind of silence that suggested something on the other side was now listening, waiting. Miles backed away from the door. One step, then another. He didn't turn around until he reached the center of the portrait wing. Only then did he notice something new. A figure standing at the end of the corridor. Still, dark, difficult to make out in the low light. Miles felt a sharp spike of adrenaline, but held himself still. The figure didn't move. It was positioned near the entrance of the gallery, where the hall branched in 3 directions. Slowly, the shadow shifted. Not the figure, just the light around it, as if the house adjusted illumination to reveal more of the shape. It wasn't a person. Not exactly. It was a silhouette. A tall, lean form with elongated limbs, painted directly onto the wall. A mural, faded and cracked with age. A figure rendered in charcoal-like strokes, its face turned away, arms stretching downward beyond natural proportions. Miles swallowed. He had walked past this wall dozens of times and had never seen this before. The mural shouldn't exist. The house had added it, or revealed it. He stepped closer, drawn to it despite every rational sense telling him not to. The mural's head was angled downward, as if listening to the floorboards. Its posture was tense, arms stretched almost to its knees, fingers sharp, like the ends of ink dripping from a quill. Beneath it, in delicate script, someone had written, "The Listener." Miles stared. A memory stirred, faint but unmistakable. He had seen that name somewhere before. In Corbin's journal, a warning scribbled in the margins. Do not speak in its presence. Miles took a shaking step backward. As he did, a soft pressure brushed against the air behind him. A change so slight he almost missed it, like a breath he didn't take. He turned around slowly. The door to the portrait chamber was open again. Not fully. Just an inch. Enough for darkness to spill out like ink. Miles's heartbeat quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. He watched the gap. Waited for movement. Expected a whisper. But none came. Instead, the house creaked. A ripple of sound traveling down the hall. Boards tightening one after another like ribs contracting beneath a deep breath. The listener mural seemed to bow slightly as the sound passed it. Miles exhaled and stepped away. The house had given him a message tonight. The painting, the mural, the journal. Piece by piece, a pattern formed. Not linear, not obvious, but deliberate. The house wasn't trying to scare him off. It was preparing him. For what? He wasn't sure yet. But he suspected the answer was hidden somewhere deeper, beyond the portrait wing, beyond the dustless room, beyond the mirror that had already recognized him. There was something binding this place together. A truth, and he was being moved toward it. He turned away from the mural and made his way back through the long gallery. As he walked, each cloth-covered portrait seemed to shift slightly in his peripheral vision, leaning toward him, drawn as if by gravity. When he reached the end of the hall, he stopped. A corridor he had never seen before stretched where the familiar staircase should have been. The house had rearranged itself. Miles felt his pulse steady, not calming, but preparing. He stepped into the new corridor, and the house closed behind him. The corridor the house created for Miles was unlike the others he had wandered before. It was narrower, darker. The walls bowed inward as though the house was bending itself around him with quiet, deliberate intent. Every step he took felt heavier, the air thicker, humming with a low vibration that stirred in his bones. Miles pressed forward, his breath quiet but controlled. The wooden floor groaned beneath him, not randomly, but rhythmically, like a heartbeat echoing through the boards. He reached the end of the corridor. A door waited there. Not grand, not decayed, not hidden. Simple, unremarkable, yet surrounded by an atmosphere that felt impossibly charged, as though the entire house led here. He touched the doorknob, warm, like a pulse beneath his fingertips. Miles turned it slowly. The door opened into a large circular room, one he had never seen, one that felt impossibly central, as if buried deep within the house's architecture, yet also somehow above it. The ceiling arched high, lost in shadow. Candles flickered along the walls in tall iron holders, illuminating the space with a soft amber glow. And in the center of the room stood Mr. Corbin. He faced away at first, shoulders slightly hunched, one hand resting on a large book atop a pedestal. The light cast his figure into sharp relief, revealing a posture that looked older, more worn than Miles remembered. Corbin slowly turned. His eyes were tired but clear, and filled with something that was not quite fear, not quite relief. "Miles," he said softly, "I hoped the house would give you more time." Miles approached cautiously. "What is this room?" Corbin's gaze shifted to the pedestal. "The threshold." The word struck something deep within Miles, like a chord plucked off key. He stepped closer. The room felt alive, each candle flame leaning subtly toward him, the air vibrating with a quiet, watchful patience. Corbin sighed. "You weren't meant to reach this place so soon. You wrote that the house remembers me," Miles said quietly. "Why? What does that mean?" Corbin hesitated. For the first time since their meeting, he looked uncertain. "Miles, the house doesn't haunt strangers," Corbin said. "It calls home those who belong to it." Miles's breath stilled. "I don't belong here. I've never been here before." Corbin shook his head, sympathy in his expression. "Your family has. A long time ago." Miles felt the floor tilt beneath him. "My family? I've never heard anything about. That's because it happened generations back," Corbin murmured. "Your great-grandmother was a Valmont by blood. She left. She escaped. The house does not forget those who leave. It waits." Miles swallowed hard. "It's been waiting for me?" "Yes." Corbin's voice trembled despite his efforts to steady it. "You are the first to return, and the house recognizes what was taken from it." Miles stepped back instinctively. Corbin stepped forward. "Miles, the portrait you saw, the reason it looked older, is because the house paints not who you are, but who you will become if you step across the threshold." Miles's heart pounded. "Become?" Corbin nodded slowly. "Every keeper of this house is chosen, not by inheritance, not by desire." He glanced at the walls as if expecting them to respond, but by recognition. Recognition. The mirror, the journal, the mural, the portrait. Pieces of a puzzle Miles had not chosen to solve. "What happens if I don't cross it?" Miles asked. A moment passed. Corbin's voice softened. "It will take what it needs from you anyway." Miles stared at him. Corbin continued, barely above a whisper. "The house survives on presence, memory, stillness. The threshold is where a soul chooses whether to settle into the house. or be absorbed by it. Miles's mouth went dry. Absorbed? Corbin nodded. What the listener takes. Miles took a slow breath. The listener. The thing painted on the wall. Corbin swallowed. Not painted. Revealed. It serves the house. It listens for those who hesitate. A faint creak echoed through the round room. A sound that did not belong to any door, any floorboard, or any wind. Miles's blood chilled. Corbin turned sharply toward the dark curve of the wall. It came again. A soft, slow, dragging sound. Like fingernails gliding across wood. Corbin's tone sharpened with urgency. Miles, you must choose. What choice? To stay or to leave? That sounds easy. It isn't. Corbin's hand shook as he placed it on the edge of the pedestal, revealing the book fully. Miles stepped closer, trying to see. It wasn't a book. It was a journal. Old, weathered, bearing the Valmont crest. The same crest Miles had seen faintly etched behind the portrait of Eleanor Valmont. Corbin opened the journal to the first page, and Miles saw his own name written there. Miles Arkin Valmont, his pulse spiked. I didn't write that, he whispered. No, Corbin replied quietly. You didn't. The dragging sound came again. Louder now, closer, circling the outer edge of the round room. Corbin stiffened. Miles, we don't have much time. He turned the page. Empty. He turned another. Empty. Page after page, all blank, except for the first bearing Miles's name. The house gave you to this journal, Corbin said. It's how it binds a keeper. Miles shook his head. I never agreed to that. And that, Corbin said, voice heavy, is exactly why the listener is coming. Miles felt cold rise along his spine. Another drag. Closer now. Slow. Patient. Tell me how to leave, Miles demanded. Tell me how to stop this. Corbin hesitated, then spoke in a low, pained voice. To leave, you must erase your name from the book, before the house fully writes the rest. Miles looked down at the empty pages, then back at the first one with his name etched in dark ink. How? He asked. Corbin's eyes filled with sorrow. You can't do it alone. The dragging stopped. A silence thick as tar fell over the room. Then, from the darkest corner of the walls, a long, thin shadow detached itself and straightened. Miles's heart froze as the shape became clear. The same elongated limbs, the same bowed head, the same impossible proportions as the mural. The listener had arrived, and it was listening. The listener did not move at first. It simply stood there, tall and impossibly thin, its head tilted toward Miles as if tasting the sound of his breath. Its silhouette wavered like heat over stone, never fully solid, but never truly fading. Corbin stepped between them instinctively, one arm out in a protective gesture. Stay behind me, he murmured. But the listener wasn't watching Corbin. It was watching the journal. The room's candles flickered violently, their flames bending toward the creature. The air thickened, humming with something ancient and restless. Miles's pulse hammered. Corbin, he whispered. Tell me how to erase my name. Corbin didn't look back. His shoulders were trembling. You can't, he said quietly. Not with your own hand. The listener's long fingers curled, joints cracking softly like old wood settling. Miles stepped back, nearly stumbling. If I can't erase it, then who can? Corbin exhaled, not in fear, but in defeat. A keeper can only be released, he said, by someone who holds a stronger tie to the house than he does. Miles frowned. What does that even mean? It means, Corbin whispered, it must be someone who already belongs to the house more fully than you. Miles's breath hitched. Corbin finally turned to look at him, and in that moment, Miles understood. The house didn't just keep people. It claimed them, slowly, quietly, patiently. And Corbin had been here far too long. Corbin, Miles's voice cracked. You're the one who can erase it. Corbin gave a small, sad smile. I've known for years that the house was waiting for someone else. Someone it could pass its memory to. His eyes glistened. But I didn't think it would be you. The listener moved just a single step, but the floor moaned under its weight. Corbin placed both hands on the journal. You must listen carefully. I can erase your name. But once I do, the house will take me in your place. Miles shook his head instantly. No, I won't let you do that. Miles, there has to be another way. There isn't. Miles's chest tightened with a painful, hollow ache. The house seemed to be holding its breath, every flame trembling in anticipation. The listener crouched slightly, its long limbs folding like an insect preparing to pounce. Corbin's voice hardened. You have seconds. Decide. Miles stared at the journal, at his name. Dark ink, certain, waiting. Then he looked at Corbin, this man who had lived half a life inside the house, carrying its weight alone, waiting for someone who could inherit the burden. And the guilt hit Miles like a blow. He didn't want Corbin to die, but he didn't want to die either. The room shuddered as the listener took another slow, deliberate step forward. Miles, Corbin said softly, you are not meant to belong here. You belong to the world outside, to people, to life. Corbin placed a trembling finger on Miles's written name. The ink began to glow faintly. The listener hissed, a low, distorted sound like breath being dragged over stone. Miles's voice broke. Corbin, please. Corbin looked at him gently. I've been ready for a long time. With his other hand, he reached into the pocket of his coat and pressed something into Miles's palm. A key. Cold. Metal. Old. The front door will open for you now, Corbin said. Don't stop. Don't turn back. Not even once. The listener lunged. Its limbs unfolded violently as it sprang toward them, but Corbin slammed his hand down onto the page with Miles' name. Light exploded from the journal. The listener shrieked, a sound so piercing the candles snapped out all at once. Miles stumbled backward as a force like a shockwave hit him in the chest, throwing him toward the doorway. He hit the floor hard. The room behind him writhed with shadows and white-hot light. Corbin's silhouette glowed for a moment, suspended between the two forces, the house as hunger, and Miles as release, before dissolving into the brilliance. Miles tried to crawl toward him. Corbin! But the doorway slammed shut with a thunderous crack. Miles screamed and pounded on the sealed door, voice breaking, but the wood only pulsed with heat. Then, silence. The corridor behind him lit gently with lanterns, one after another, guiding him forward. The house was no longer threatening him. It was showing him the way out. Miles staggered to his feet, heart in shreds, tears blurring his vision. He walked. Every hallway he passed through felt both familiar and foreign, as if the house had rewritten itself now that it no longer needed to keep him. Finally, he reached the foyer. The front door, the massive iron-latched door that had never budged, now stood slightly open. The night air beyond it rolled in, cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp soil. Miles approached slowly. He hesitated in the doorway and looked back. For a moment, he thought he saw Corbin standing at the top of the staircase, watching him, smiling faintly. Then the house lights flickered, and the silhouette vanished. Miles stepped outside. The door creaked shut behind him on its own, sealing with a soft, definitive click. The house, silent now, faded into the darkness of the valley. And Miles walked toward the faint glow of the road, holding the key Corbin had given him. The night felt endless, but he was free. The house had released him, but it had kept something else, something it would never let go of. Someone who had given Miles his life back. Miles whispered into the cold night air, "Thank you." And somewhere deep inside the house, a single candle flame flickered back to life, awaiting the next name.